All right, guys, good morning and welcome to the first Saturday coffee conversation with Guster 420. I really couldn't sleep last night because this Lucky Maverick post by Bales Football on his explanation to the $35,000 John Morant Cosmic Series 1 Mint 1 purchase had me reeling. And, his article that he posted, I think, coincides with my hot take from episode 2. But I also think it disagrees, and I wanted to just provide my take just kind of line by line. And before I did that, I want to start off by this review talking about how this reminded me a lot of the Michael Saylor article that he wrote to investors, more or less explaining his Bitcoin bullishness at the end of 2020. And in that article, Michael Saylor begins with an old fish proverb where two young fish are swimming along and they pass an older fish on their way. And as they pass him, the older fish says to the younger fish, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And they both say, "Fine, thanks," and keep moving along until they pass the veteran fish, and one young fish says to another, "What is water?" And I think the proverb is meant to pose the question, what exactly is money, and is it possible that we've thought about this all wrong? Just because our veteran investors or our veteran boomers, if you will, think that money is supposed to be organized in a certain way and that assets are supposed to be organized in a certain way, and speculative goods are not truly or don't have intrinsic value, who's to say that that is how it must be defined into the future? And Bales Football, I think, does a really nice job in this article displaying how we see this space of trading collectibles revolutionizing by the day here, and beginning really with NBA blank shot. We're still carrying that through, guys. We're carrying that through. We are not going to say NBA bottom shot. All right. So, he kind of begins similar to Michael, and he tells a story about his grandpa and how he told his grandfather told him that he should be purchasing Bitcoin, and that kind of leads to this really interesting sort of like ethos statement where you have to be okay being wrong and being thought a moron if you're not okay with people thinking you're an idiot, sometimes because you make giant mistakes and sometimes because they're the morons not seeing what's obvious to you. You can't achieve unconventional success. So really interesting. No one wants to take that big ass chance, but certainly Bales Football is willing to do that. And kind of the disconnect between these sorts of moves, particularly now with disruptive technologies such as NBA blank shot, is that there's a lack of understanding in the space. And to be honest, I'm still learning about this space. But this idea that these NFTs are non-fungible tokens is kind of where I need to do more learning, and I think anybody who's new to this space should do more learning as well. So it is interesting that he went in with a group of investors, and I think you'll start to see this. I think because this space is new, you'll see a group of guys get together, a group of girls or whoever kind of get together and gather funds as a way of maybe dispelling a bit of that risk. $35,000 is a lot of money, and I think we can have our convictions, but it is nice to spread that risk around, and I think you'll see more of that. Well, like groups of guys getting together, groups of guys and girls figuring out how together they can both combine their capital and maybe just diverse some of that risk away. So let's get into his ultimate philosophy. Okay, and he begins kind of by talking about how he was very interested in a Honus Wagner card that they ultimately did not get, and this tweet was really interesting where, most people have around 0 to 5% in alts, and this will most likely change if bonds remain at zero. Like, well, that really piques my interest. Not kind of put that together. And he talked about how he paired up with Mark Cuban and they started developing this fantasy labs. Felt like they didn't quite know enough, but were interested in some of the other tools that have been like becoming tokenized. And there was this concept in Discord of burning cards as a way to cut supply, and ultimately this was a conversation that developed that maybe trading cards will become tokenized and then burned themselves, so their only existence remains online. There is a threat that I see of fraud in this trading card market, and blockchain definitely solves that. I think there's a way to view this as just categorizing these speculative goods, and to keep it just a little bit tidier, and that's very intriguing to me. Now, this last piece really kind of brought a chuckle to my eye. And he says, a lot of these new concepts will look ridiculous at first. The next big thing will start out looking like a toy. The reason why things sneak into by incumbents is that the next thing starts out as toys. These disruptive technology theory, where the observation that the technologies tend to get better at a faster rate than users' needs increase. From this simple insight follows all kinds of interesting conclusions on how markets and products change over time. And if you've been watching the marketplace, you're already seeing it. There was an update last night I woke up to this morning that has increased the usability of the marketplace. And, in my hot take, I provided my insight as to why there is intrinsic value in these moments, intrinsic value that maybe even Bitcoin can't see. And I think Bales football kind of just highlights it to a better degree, maybe in a more succinct fashion, where these trading cards might very well become stock markets for athletes. And I think you're already seeing it. I think there are some people who are jumping into the marketplace who are making bets on players they see future growth in. I think that some of those opinions and investments will see dividends. I see some of them as not seeing quite as much dividends as some other more accurate projections. And it is my goal to be able, in the next couple podcasts, to bring on hosts that will share their perspectives. I don't want to have I will certainly have my convictions, but I want to bring on different ideas, different perspectives. I think that there is actually an institutional investor that is lurking in the weeds, and I want to bring them out, and I want to hear what those investors are thinking about, because this space is rapidly developing, and I totally agree with Bales Football that these trading cards are going to act as stock market assets for these athletes that traders can jump in and out of. Now, this is where we begin to disagree. And Bales Football says, why do we need this thing to exist in the physical world at all to have value? And, he ultimately highlights that, we should be understanding as to, what the kids in high school are interested in, what things are moving into the digitized space, and how will this change the investment landscape. He ultimately gets to the juncture that he's interested in these sports cards from two perspectives: as a fine art at a high end, and at a player stock market across the entire industry. You inevitably start to ask, why do these things need to exist in physical form? He says they don't. Okay? My suggestion is they do, because Swish Fantasy is going to turn into a monster. It is going to turn into a robust fantasy platform where players can jump in just in a league and organize themselves and organize. It can be in a weekly league, monthly league, daily league. Keep up with old high school and college buddies, or grow it out global, and have representatives from different places of the world. Beyond just the free platform, I think I totally see a DraftKings sort of daily rotisserie league where you purchase a roster spot, and you fill out your roster depending on the nature of that fantasy competition. That could be daily, that could be weekly, that could be monthly. Again, that could be, you can almost expand those contests into a 10-pack league where 10 people purchase 10 packs together. Those packs are opened uniformly, and then a snake draft is conducted from the cards that were taken from the pack, and then that in turn turns into a contest. So there's so much money here to be made. There's so many different offshoots. I've been yelling and screaming at Swish to keep moving forward, because this is where I see the intrinsic value. And I think when you can start to develop a platform where these moments can work for you, I think that's when intrinsic value will be seen. That's when you're going to get people watching NBA games, not just for the viewing pleasure, but for the investment insight to tracking their current wagers and also plotting for their future earnings. I think it's so interesting. I think that this space has just gotten going. I do disagree that they don't have value. I don't see gold is to Bitcoin as physical trades are to NFTs. I think this NFT is a totally different space. And I think that while Bales Football has it right with his investment, I think that he outlines why, in these 5 pieces, why this space can be revolutionary. I really think that there's going to be a lot of money piling into the space, not just users, but money, because you can own them. It's provable and unfalsifiable. They're authentic. Unlike with physical art, fraud is not a problem. Scarcity, you know exactly how many cards there are. You know exactly if that card had been sold before, and you know exactly the prices other cards in the same mint class has been sold. From a transparency perspective, the blockchain allows that to happen. And the instantaneous nature of the transactions kind of cap it all off. It happens right away. You can see here that within just about 25 hours, he went ahead and flipped for 900. 5 days, another K. Here it's just about a week, and look at this. We're talking about just an hour where he made about $100. And so that's, I think, the possibilities that are open here. I think you have some guys like Pranksy who have all of these cards that can be a lead designer. He categorizes himself as the Walmart of NFTs. I would make sure to be following him as this space is rapidly developing. I think the NFL and MLB are laggards and will be forced to come into the space if they don't come into it now. And I will leave you guys with this, because I totally agree with this last statement. There's a whole generation of young, smart people who've grown up in a fundamentally different way from me and you. Whether or not we get it, and we get that future, is irrelevant to how it will transpire. And I think, if nothing else, guys, you should be watching this space. You're stupid if you are not.